Hello and welcome to this GG Weekend Watch, sponsored by SBK, with a revised team again this week, with the returning Rory Delargy, who is great to have you back on then, Rory. Daryl Carter, of course, back for more, and myself from a different location, as you can see. I'm coming to you from Oaksey House today. Do not worry, no injuries in at all. I've been fortunate enough to just be doing a Chamberlain Sports Media Day, so let's see if I can put any of the skills I've learned this morning into practice. But before we get into the racing then proper, you have to allow us a brief moment just to indulge in the winners last week, because there were plenty of them from the team. So we had Dolos winning at 10-1 for Daryl and I, Vauban winning at 9-4 for Daryl, Glen Forcer at 10-3 for Rory, Long Press at 8-13 for Andrew and Rory, Ahoy Senior for Rory at 8-11, Green Book at 6-1 for Rory, Don Levant 13-2, he went off at each way, but tipped up though at 14-1 by Daryl. A Wave of the Sea also for Daryl at 9-2. So hopefully more of the same then this week. Very well done to the lads for all of their hard work last week. And let's see if we cannot continue it into this week's racing. So we're going to start with the 1:15 at Newbury. This is a Novices Limited handicap chase for 5-year-olds and over 2 miles 7, where Brave Man's Game currently heads the betting as the 8-11 favourite, as he takes in this race on his way to Uttoxeter, most likely the Brown Advisory at the Cheltenham Festival. So, Daryl, starting with you, please. How do you play this race?
I don't know. I don't really want to get involved, in all honesty, in the first race. But I just thought it was strange that they were running here, really. I know they're probably looking for a prep run before Cheltenham, but I don't think Paul's too keen to go to Cheltenham. So, I don't know. Running in the handicap, giving chunks of weight away to some progressive novices is not ideal. I wouldn't have thought. Look, I don't want to touch it because I think he's the best horse in the race. I don't want to take him on with anything. I don't think anything else has got the improvement in them to go beyond the marks that they're pretty much at, really. I know Pat's Fancy is quite interesting off 143. He's probably one of the horses that have really earned their mark. I think there's a few inflated ones in here. Obviously, the first thing to say, or one of the first things to say, is he's putting most of this field out of the handicap when he's running in here. So it's probably not as stiff a test as originally you think when you think he's got to give chunks of weight away. I don't want to get involved. I'd be interested to see him because I think it has ramifications for later on in the card. I know everybody's talking about the stable form of Paul Nicholls, this, that, and the other, all that rubbish. But the bare facts of it is that if Brave Man's Game is beaten in here or looks as though he's going to get beaten at any stage, then Clan des Obeaux later on in the card is going to drift out. So I think it's an informative race for a betting perspective for later on in the card, just not to get involved in at this stage, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a very sensible way to take this race, really. As you say, potential ramifications for maybe the Cheltenham Festival of Brave Man's Game, but also later in the card with the Paul Nicholls form there that Daryl still doesn't quite buy into. Rory, your take on this race, please.
Well, obviously, as a backer of Dolos, Daryl won't be buying into the Nicholls form. The only way you could possibly think there wasn't a problem with the Nicholls yard is if the only horse you backed in the last week was Dolos, who was winning that Sandown handicap for the third time. I think he's running it 5 times, won it 3 times. But elsewhere, they were running disappointingly, particularly in Ireland. I know you can make excuses for the pair who went over there. The ground went against them to a degree, and they both went up the inside when everyone was keen to avoid that. But they were beaten a hell of a long way. And I know Paul Nicholls, he doesn't like over-talking these things, but he said there seems to be an issue in the yard. They're doing everything they can to find out what it is. But as long as the work riders are coming back and saying, this horse is in good form, is working well, feels good to me, then he will keep running them. Obviously, the horses he's been running in the last couple of weeks, he's not been expecting to run badly either, but they have to a large degree. So we don't really know where we stand. I always tend to take the better horses in a yard as a rule apart. You'll often see a big stable running a lot of horses who are below the top class and who disappoint for a little while. But the very good horses tend to run well. And the fact that Frodon and Granatine ran so poorly at Leopardstown is a worry to me. I'd agree with Daryl. The Brave Man's Game really ought to win this race. This should be Newbury suits him really well. I know he won over 3 miles at Kempton. I'm not sure he's the strongest stayer in the world at that trip, because he's such a good jumper and a forward goer. I think it suits him better maybe to be just slightly short of 3 miles. But while in handicapping terms, both Grumpy Charlie and Pat's Fancy have a chance of beating him, he's capable of taking any horse out of the comfort zone if he wants to. The question is whether they're going to be, going all out to do that when there's slight concerns about the yard, or whether he's going to be given a slightly more patient ride, so as not to put the gun to his head. In which case, I think that brings the others into it more. But as Daryl says, you don't have to punt on all the races this weekend. And if you're backing Brave Man's Game here, you're having a bet on the horse, but you're also having a bet on the stable form. And the market does not reflect that at the moment. I think Brave Man's Game possibly ends up being a shade of odds against on the day because of the worries about the yard. And of course, this will be his first runner in the day, won't it? So it's not like as soon as Paul Nicholls gets 2 winners, this will all be forgotten. But until that time, then punters and bookmakers,
my point exactly.
they will look to oppose the runners from the yard. And so I think you get a bigger price at my Brave Man's Game. I wouldn't be in a rush to back him, but I'd not be in a rush to lay him either at the prices. So it's a race, as Daryl says, you'll learn a lot from in terms of where you stand.
Yeah, as the lads say there, not every race is a betting race, and this is very much a learning race more so than anything else, and especially about that stable form and exactly what price Brave Man's Game is going to go off at with market confidence, either siding with him or siding against. But it's going to be interesting to see nonetheless. We'll move on to our next race then. This is the 150. This is a 0 to 145 handicap hurdle for 4-year-olds and over 3 miles, with the Brimming Water, the current favourite at the time of recording, for the Sams of Sam Drinkwater and Sam Twiston Davis. So, Rory, please solve this handicap puzzle for us.
A couple of horses I'm interested in here at reasonable prices. I'm not actually looking at the odds at the moment, but I imagine you're getting big odds about the horse that I'm going to put up as my selection each way in the race. That being Skandiburg.
No!
Skandiburg is a horse who's been on my radar for a while. Now he's left Jamie Snowden, but he's only gone to Charlotte Fuller, who's Paige Fuller's mum. She knows what she's doing. Obviously, there's no point looking around at her record for her achievements. She's fundamentally just been training a few pointers for Paige for the last few years. But the family know their horses very well, much more in sort of in a polo background, for example. But I wouldn't be concerned about the fact that Skandiburg has officially changed stables. And he was over the wrong trip at Ascot last time out. I ended up putting him up that day at a massive, it was 66 to 1. I think you could get bigger than that in the morning. And I ended up putting him up as a small bet, just on the basis that he's better than his form makes him look. He was 5th over course and distance in November at the Winter Carnival meeting. I thought he ran very well that day. He's rated 142 there by the handicapper. He's a full £10 lower now and back at a course and distance where he can do well. So I think he's worth backing at a big price. There are lots of horses that you'd have question marks in this race from the big breakaway down. And I think Skandiburg, back at 3 miles, is liable to run his race. I wanted to get involved in him earlier in the week, but he was also entered in a Pertemps qualifier at Exeter the following day, and Paige Fuller was dropped up there. So I was worried about losing my money and picking the wrong race. This is the right race for him. I wouldn't be running him at Exeter. This is the right race, and I think he runs a decent race here at a biggish price. The other horse I'm interested in here is What's Up With You, but he does not want 3 miles based on his run at Cheltenham last time out. But I think he'd be interesting back at sort of 2 mile 5, and he might go to Cheltenham, I suppose, for something like the Coral Cup or for the boys race. And actually, he'd struggle. I don't see unless Ben Pauling's convinced he stays 3 miles, getting beaten here will sort of rule him out of Cheltenham Festival handicaps. Although there is that meeting at Kempton after Cheltenham, where the horses who missed the cut get in. He'd be very interesting in the 2 mile 5, I think it's a Silver Cross handicap hurdle. He's definitely capable of winning off 125, but based on his run at Cheltenham last time out, it won't be over 3 miles.
Yeah, for sure then. So What's Up With You, 5 to 1. But as you say, if he wants to go and win this, well, at least that might confirm him over 3 miles. But if not, he's going to struggle to get into the Cheltenham Festival for that mark of 125, no matter what race. So maybe watch out for him then for Kempton, dropping back down trip. But Skandiburg at 16 to 1 then, off that £10 lower mark, back over his favourite course and distance for Rory. 2 interesting takes. Daryl, yourself, please.
33s.
Oh! I see your 16s. I raise you.
Yeah, well, there is 33s around. He was 40s during the week as well. I thought that was a massive prize for Skandiburg. He was beaten 10 lengths by a subsequent winner over, over course and distance here by Dolphin Square. He's £10 lower now. So just on that simple fact alone, I know that's too simple to be true, but he ought to go close in this. I couldn't believe they were running him over 2.5 the last twice. He's definitely a 3-miler, an out-and-out 3-miler. The slight concern I have with him is sometimes they give him far too much to do. So I'd like to see him ridden a little bit more forwardly, not prominently, but a little bit more forwardly than he normally is, like dropped right out of the back. I mean, he was only 9-1 for the Temps in 2020. He's now 33-1 for this Mickey Mouse race at Newbury. I think he's a cracking bet at the prices. Probably anything 16-1 above. The other one I really like in here though is the Big Breakaway. Now I know connections have said that he's going to have a target over fences going forward, but they genuinely don't just give their horses a soft prep. They're normally here to run and run well. This horse is off a mark of 144. He would have won a Grade 1 over fences in the Quarto Star if not for clatter in the last, 18 months ago or whatever. I think he's a very good horse. He's 2 from 3 over. Is he 2 from 3 or 3 from 4 over hurdles? The only defeat came in the Ballymore to Envoy Allen, who at the time was sweeping everything in front of him on the side. I think he's very well handicapped off a mark of 144. I wouldn't be surprised if they kept him over hurdles going forward after this, if he wins well. First start after a wind-up. There's lots of positives. He's won at the course. He's the best horse in the race, undoubtedly, and he's 9-1. So I'm going to have a good bet on the Big Breakaway, and I will be covering as well on Skandiburg because I think he's a wild price.
Yes, so 2 again big prices then for Daryl in this race. The class act in this race then potentially for the Big Breakaway back over hurdles, but also, sorry, I was doing a disservice then to Rory's tip then of 16-1. There is 33s about Skandiburg as well, but both of the lads then giving a favourable mention to Charlotte Fuller's runner. We'll move on to the 225 at Newbury. This is our first graded action in the form of the Grade 2 Denman Chase for 5 rods and over 2 miles 7, where Clanders Obeaux bids to go 1 better than he did in the race last year. So, Daryl, back to you, please. Can Clan get another Newbury win?
Well, he's a 1-3 shot, really, isn't he, Clanders Obeaux? But because of the stable form, he's 10-11. I think he's by far the best horse in the race. I don't think Royal Pagaille wants dry and good to soft ground. I think much respect for him. I tipped him last time in the Peter Marsh, but I think ideal conditions are soft ground and nice flat track like Haydock. I know Newbury's flat as well, but just soft ground preference. He's a lovely horse, don't get me wrong, but Clanders Obeaux is easily the class act in this race. Thrasher Countenance returning from 489 days off. I assume he will probably be the pace angle, and this might just set him up for something else going forward. Eldorado Allen's slightly interesting, I guess, if this turns into a real test. I know he's stepping up in trip. This could well suit him. So he would be very interesting around 10-1. But Clanders Obeaux is surely a winner and waiting in this. I mean, I've seen even money about for him. I think that's madness. The value you can get because a stable is out of form is ridiculous, really. I mean, Dolos the other week should not have gone off at 10-1 when he had ideal race conditions. I'm a big believer in judging horses individually, as you know, on their ideal race conditions. And if they let me down, then so be it. But I think every horse is individual. Unless there's something out of the ordinary, of course, I should just say that. But Clanders Obeaux has a lot in his favour here. I know he was beaten last year by his stablemate Secret Advisor, but he was giving him £6 that day, and that horse had lightning quick ground, which is what he loves. I think he's the best horse in the race. I don't think the Kempton run was too bad. I think he should be winning.
Yeah, for sure. And then, Rory, do you agree with that there's potentially some value about Clanders Obeaux's price currently?
Well, yeah, largely. I mean, I'm more concerned about the yard form than Daryl is. And again, as I said, there's that bias Daryl has about finding the one winner that Paul Nicholls has had in the last 3 weeks.
It's that's the one horse that had everything in.
Oh yeah, I grant you that. I understand that, and you did have everything. But in fairness, plenty of the Nicholls horses in the last fortnight have been favourites and should have been winning their races and have disappointed. And it's not just that they're finishing second and third and running close to form. A lot of them are running way below form. And you know, Nichols himself is going through the feed and trying to find out what it is.
That's
so
different. If there's something in the feed or there's something out of the ordinary there like that, and a situation comes up, I totally agree with that. But until you find that excuse, so many times a trainer will always offer an excuse why his horse has been beaten when really he's just not the best horse in the race. He's been
absolutely agree with that. Yeah. So that the question here is whether you can trust Clanders Obeaux to run to form, and if he does, you don't have to make any excuses for him. He's been a tremendously consistent chaser over the years, and he really should be getting the job done here. I can't have I like Eldorado Allen, but I can't have him as a 3-miler. I thought he ran out of stamina over 2.5 at the entry last year. He stayed a little bit better this season, but even then, I think he didn't exactly run above form at Huntingdon over 2.5.
Rory?
I think he's not a true 2.5 miler for me, although he gets the trip. What he wants is the way the race panned out at Exeter suited him ideally. You know, he wants. He's got a high cruising speed, and maybe he doesn't have a turn of foot at the end of it. And he's one of those horses that, given a strongly run race at an unusual trip, that 2 mile 2 of the Haldon Gold Cup with a stiff finish suited him. But he looked a wee bit short of pace at Huntingdon, and although he's run well at Kempton last time out, again he was picked up fairly easily by Mr. Fisher later on. I thought that was a really creditable run, but it just shows that he's in no man's land as a chaser, and I'm not sure that a step up to 3 miles is going to suit him, because unless they've got the balls to just go out there and say, right, we're actually going to try to dominate this race, go off in front, slow it down as suits them, and use the fact that he's got a little bit of speed for shorter to win the race. But I think most horses stepping up and trip aren't ridden that way. They tend to be ridden conservatively, and I think that will just show his lack of gears again. So I struggle to find him in this race. Imperial Aura could bounce back, but I think Kim Bailey's tearing his hair out with his horses. Loads of talent, but he's found various ways of losing recently. That was a really tough race he was in last time at the entry, the mini clouds. The conditions were dreadful that day, and as a one-off, I can forgive it. But he's got 4 consecutive non-completions now, and he's got a little bit to prove in the back of that. He's a lot better than that makes him look, and if he's back to the form that saw him win a Grade 2 at Ascot in November of 2020, then he's a player here. But even at that time, I thought. I spoke to Kim about something entirely different pre-Cheltenham last year, and I've got the idea that this horse is a bit of an enigma even then. So what do you expect of him? I don't know. I'd probably end up going with Royal Pagaille here. I know you said he needs deep ground, but what we have is his improvement in the winter last year when the ground happened to be on the soft side. It wasn't absolutely hog deep when he won at Kempton. The ground doesn't get really deep at Kempton on the chase course. And then he's followed up in the Peter Marsh at Haydock. I thought he ran very well compared to most in the Betfair chase at Haydock, and that was in good ground. So it's ground that's at least as quick as this is going to be. I don't think that was a problem for him. I think obviously in good soft ground in the Cheltenham Gold Cup, he was caught out by his lack of experience then. Flat track suits him really well. I think that the issue with him is that he wants a flat track from what we've seen so far. Although maybe he's just needed a little bit more experience, and he might be worth throwing into the Gold Cup again. But I'd be inclined to chance him in this race because he's a thoroughly genuine horse. I didn't think he had anything to spare, in fairness, when he won the Peter Marsh last time. I thought it was a great ride from Charlie Deutsch. But what you're pretty much guaranteed in most of these races is a great ride from Charlie Deutsch. So that always gives you a bit of confidence. And he's a couple of years younger as well. I would just favour him to beat Clanders Obeaux. With no worries about the Venetia Williams yard, and absolutely flying for him again at the moment.
Yeah, they clearly are, aren't they? Say Charlie Deutsch riding out of his skin, as that old stereotype goes then in itself. So Royal Pagaille for Rory to take on Clanders Obeaux at the head of a market, and I hope that he won't be inconvenienced by the drying ground. So different takes on that race, but very interesting nonetheless. We'll move on to the 3 o'clock now. This is another Grade 2 in our next contest. This is the Game Spirit Chase, the 5-year-old over 2 miles, which is a much more open affair for these 2 milers. Only 5 runners, all very likeable types. Rory, back to you, please, for your take on this race.
Yeah, it was insane. We got 5 runners. It's a shame we've now lost Editor to
We've
Geek.
literally just lost Editor to Geek. As we speak, he's gone.
And that's a real shame because he was a real up and comer, an interesting outsider for the champion chase, but he's out of it now. And the question here is exactly what the ground is going to be like. The faster it is, the more it will suit Sceau Royal. It was one race too many for him when he ran in the international. I know Alan King was absolutely kicking himself for that as well, because he'd run well enough in the Fighting Fifth up at Newcastle. But Sceau Royal is a horse who doesn't take an awful lot of racing. He's very easy to get fit. He's always well worth backing after a break. But he tends to he can take 2 runs, maybe 3 runs, but then he loses his form, loses his edge. And that's what happened to him when he was well beaten at Cheltenham in December. Alan, as I said, he kind of suspected that was going to happen. He put him in against his better judgment, and then he was cross about it afterwards. He's thoroughly reliable when conditions are in his favour. He does handle soft ground, but he wants it, he would love it if it was good to firm here. Yeah. For example, that would suit him down to the ground. He was a really unlucky loser in the champion chase last year. Now, I wouldn't say that he was the best horse in the champion chase, but the way that race was panning out, he was going to run a massive race, and he's gone for a run up the inside off the front runner after the third last fence and got badly chopped off. You don't try to go up the inside of Gavin Sheehan at that stage of a race and for him to say, off you go, Daryl. So they had a massive coming together, and Sceau Royal then he's lost. He looked like he was going to come down. He lost about 15 lengths, and he rallied really well to finish on the heels of the leaders. He's as good as ever at the age of 10. He hasn't run over fences since the celebration chase at Sandown last year, and he's as good over hurdles. But he definitely runs his race here, and I think he'll run really well. He is fundamentally a better horse than Sky Pirate, so I'm happy to oppose John Joes here. And I'm not a massive fan of Hitman. Forget the Nichols form. Let's not touch on that particular subject here. I'm just not a huge fan of Hitman in open company, and I could happily be against him. The danger again is Venetia with Funambule Sivola, who's a course and distance winner. He was a winner of a mark of 152 at Doncaster last time out. He improved all through last season, and he's verging on a Grade 1 performer. Hasn't quite got that yet, but this is the perfect setup for him to get into that kind of class. And he would be, I'm going to go to Newbury on Friday and see what I think of the ground, because they're still calling it, are they calling it good to soft in places, or just good to soft all around? Yeah, good to soft all around. I got the impression that given how little rain there's been here in the last, we had a heavy rain for about an hour last Friday. Otherwise, it's been pretty dry here for a long time. Newbury doesn't, the ground doesn't tend to get very deep there. Autumn and spring, so I thought it would dry out fairly quickly. And if it's nudging good, or I think it's going to be good all over, then I'll be with Sceau Royal. If it's on the soft side, that would tip me a little bit towards Funambule Sivola. But for the purposes of the podcast, I will be with the top one, Sceau Royal.
So Royal, as you say, at this moment in time for the podcast, but if the ground is good to soft all round as it's currently listed, you'll stay with him, but assess it then on the day, and it may well change to Funambule Sivola. Apologies, by the way, if I keep appearing on the screen. I'm currently sat in a room next to an equisizer that someone is using, so the noise keeps coming through and keeps bringing me up on the display, so apologies for that. Such is the nature of Oaksey House. But Daryl, back to you, please, for your assessment of this race.
Yeah, do you know what? I looked at these entries and I thought, why Venetia? Why? I really, really fancy him for the Grand.
I thought of you straight away with this race, I'm not going to lie.
I thought, what? And I thought I tell you what, he's given me the right indications as well. They ran at Cheltenham over 2.5. I thought he was given a very easy time of things that day. They've gone to Doncaster. I didn't think Charlie went for everything until after last. It was all hands and heels. And then he just made sure that he won snugly by a length. I thought he had loads in hand that day. And then they've come here. Now, I'm just hoping and praying that they're just here to pick up some prize money. I am, because I could be very upset come Saturday afternoon at 3:05. I backed Sceau Royale and Hitman during the week, anti-post. So I'm quite happy Editor of the Geeks come out. So I've got effectively two horses to beat really for backing them both. I think I backed Royale more heavily than I did Hitman. Hitman was more of a stake cover really. I do fancy Royale. I think he's continuously underestimated. He is a grade 1 performer. All right, he's vulnerable to a superstar in terms of an Altior or a horse like that, of that caliber as Shishkin. But when he gets his ideal conditions, which I'm hoping the drying ground at Newbury will be, I think he's going to be very hard to beat. He is a wonderful horse. I've loved him for a long time. I think he's tactically versatile in terms of I thought it was good that Edwardstone was in here to make the pace, but now he's come out. I'm not too worried because he's got a lovely turn of foot. I think he's quicker than Hitman. I think Hitman's got quite a high cruising speed. I would suspect that he will probably take up the running now. And I hope Royale will just be able to sit and pounce. But I do know that Fernando Sivler, if they're here to win this, then he's going to be sat just off Royale. So I think it's between Royale and Fernando Sivler. I wish I'd have backed Fernando Sivler during the week instead of Hitman, but I didn't. So let's hope we get the right result. Royale wins, and Fernando Sivler makes a small mistake, and Charlie Deutsch gives him an easy time just to pick up the.
Would you like him to unseat when going well at the third last?
No.
Therefore, the handicapper can't put him up. But
yeah.
you know perfectly well that
they the tricky third last.
Yeah, unseat would be just fine. The interesting thing as well is they've got Breizh Sceau running in the Kingmaker at Warwick.
Yeah.
Now Breizh Sceau is obviously on a mark of 145, but if he was to go and win that Kingmaker, then obviously he'd be going to or get close. He'll be going to the Alko. So I just wonder if that race runs before this, if they'll get on the old walkie-talkies down to Charlie at Newbury. If Breizh Sceau is going to head to the Alko and go, take it easy on him.
Yeah, we need you in the Grand Annual. We need you, Fernando. That was my thought when I saw both Breizh Sceau and Fernando Savola running this weekend. I thought, well, there goes my two entryways into the Grand Annual then for this season. So no, I did think of you straight away then, Daryl, when I saw that Fernando Savola had been declared for this race. So do spare a thought for Daryl on Saturday of how Fernando Savola is going, looking ahead to his Cheltenham Festival bets as well. But interesting takes on the race nonetheless. And then our final scheduled race from Newbury, at least, is a feature race of the day. This is up next in the form of the Betfair Hurdle. It's a grade 3 handicap for 4-year-olds on over 2 miles at 3:35. Only 14 runners, which is a disappointing turnout for the prize money on offer, of course. But Daryl, starting with you, how do you assess the Betfair Hurdle?
Am I on now?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we've got you.
I've been struggling with this race all week. I wish I never did it. I started to look at this race from a statistical point of view. And I wish I never started. Like 7 of the last 10 winners had come out of graded company last time. 9 of the last 10 placed in the first 3 last time out. 5 or 6-year-old novice. All points to Nappers Hill, but then I don't think Nappers Hill is extremely well handicapped off a mark of 135. So I was going around the doldrums. I'll back 2. The first one is Broomfield Burg, because I was quite impressed with what he did at Kempton. And everywhere you look throughout his form, it suggests that he could well be better than a mark of 134. His Cheltenham run the time before when he ran off a mark of 130. He obviously didn't go past Lively Citizen, but he travelled all over the field. That race has worked out okay. The winner is now £9 higher. He's £4 higher. The hood came off next time at Kempton. And I thought that was interesting because he settled really well at Kempton. Jumped completely different to the way he did at Cheltenham. He was flicking over his hurdles at Kempton. And he quickened away in the style of a useful, improving horse. And I think that's been the case with Broomfield Burg. I think they've been teaching him for quite a long time. And finally, things start to all be coming together. So I'm glad the hood's left off again, because I think there's plenty of improvements come with that hood off. Perhaps that just kept too much of a lid on him. You are going to have that worry, though, because I think he's going to travel into the race right down to the last. And you're going to have that worry about whether he's going to quicken on and go past under pressure. That'd be the only slight concern. But I do think he's ahead of his mark of 134. I was delving as deep as I could into JPR1. And I know everybody fancies JPR1. And I can see it. He's open to vast improvement. Of course he is. I just think that might come over 2.5 rather than 2 miles. I think Broomfield Burg is an out-and-out 2-miler. Whereas I think JPR1 is going to have... improvements come over down the line and when he goes up in trip. And every time I was going through JPR1's form, I just kept coming up with marks between 130 and 134. And there was nothing really to excite me too much about him. So I had to leave him. I went with Broomfield Burg. There's loads of choices in here. The other one I picked out a big price was he's 40-1. It's a horse called Howdyalikemenow for Evan Williams. Had a good few Saturday winners the last few weeks. And it was just very strange that they ran him at Warwick in the Grade 2 behind Staghorn in the Leamington Novices Hurdle. He's never ran over further than 2 miles. He definitely doesn't get 2 miles 5 on deep ground at Warwick. Prior to that, he bolted up at Foss Lass on heavy ground, beating Wicked West, who's a pretty solid yardstick at around 130. But if you go back to his Stratford run, it was really, really interesting. He had ran an excellent time figure. In fact, he was 12 lengths faster than the juvenile winner on the card, rated 124. He was 29 lengths faster than the bumper winner on the card, who is that Ascon Risk, who played 126 over hurdles. And he did it very easily. So was just flicking through the form of that. JJ Riley was in second. He's now rated 130. I don't know if that's quite believable. But he went out and beat Irish Biggle by 15 lengths at Doncaster. And in third was a horse called Grange Clare Glory. Grange Clare Glory was beaten by JPR1 at Taunton, beaten 8 lengths by him that day. And I just thought that was interesting. And Just the Man as well actually formed ties in with Broomfield Burg from that Cheltenham run and from the fact that he chased Black Poppy home at Hereford and was beaten just a neck. Black Poppy was obviously beaten by Broomfield Burg at Kempton. I just thought it was a very strange campaign from him. He went and won at Kempton. He went and won at Fakenham after winning at Stratford. Then he was 13th at Cheltenham behind MC Alpine. But it was a really weird run. Like, he was tanking along, and all of a sudden they just stomped round him and they've just pulled away from him. All of a sudden he's at the rear of the field jumping the third last. And then he stuck to the task again and finished under a hands and heels ride. I just thought it was really, really strange. He's got the time figures. I think he could be better than a mark of 127. He's got a nice piece of form from Wexford when he was over in Ireland. Yeah, I just think he's got a good chance at 40-1. I think he should be ridden prominently. So I'm going to back him and I'm going to back Broomfield Burg. But you can make cases for every single runner in this field.
Yeah, definitely. But I love that, though. Very impressive, Daryl, I must say, for going around there for the intertwining form lines between Howdyalikemenow and what he's beaten in the past and how that basically ties in with those runners more prominently in the market. So very well done there. That was very
It could be a load of nonsense, Kate, yeah.
It sounded good for now, so who cares? But so him at 40-1, but also the other horse you like then. Oh, I've lost him in the betting now. What price is Broomfield Burg? 5-1.
5-1, yeah.
Then potentially for him as well, then for Daryl. So Rory, back to you for the Betfair Hurdle.
Yeah, good work from Daryl there, I think. Did you spot anything else in that Cheltenham race that Howdyalikemenow ran in that caught the eye, Daryl?
I haven't got my notes with me right now.
I've just been looking back at that this morning. I've written a horse up for a Cheltenham handicap that was in that contest.
Oh, are you going to give us any more teasers? Any more?
Well, I don't know. It's in the Weatherby Cheltenham Festival guide, so I probably shouldn't be mentioning it. Otherwise, they won't be paying me for my work. But well, I've given you enough of a clue in mentioning that race.
Go back and watch the race.
Nara will spot it straight away. It has to be said, but that's by the by. Listen, there's a horse I've been I backed when the entries first came out for this race, and I'm more than happy to stick with him. He's a long-term project for me. I've always thought this race this year would be what he'd be aimed at. You can pick through his form and pick occasional holes in it, but Royaume Uni, I think, will run really well for Gary Moore. Of the Moore horses, Jimmy rides Royaume Uni. He caught my eye in a couple of juvenile handicaps last year, catching a bit of a charter at Ascot when I backed him at a price. He won at Plumpton in his reappearance. His only disappointment in recent times, he ran in the flat under Ryan at Newmarket over 2 miles and just didn't get home at all. He's quite a free goer. And so he won very, very easily at Plumpton on his return. I thought my issue with him at the start of the season was I think he might win the Betfair Hurdle. He needs to go up in the weights if he's going to do that. So he's won against lesser opposition at Plumpton, pulling a cart. And he went up from 116 to 123. He then went to Cheltenham for a handicap hurdle at the December meeting, and I thought he ran very well. Totally not wanted in the market. I think it's about a 5-1 shot the night before. He's ended up going off at 14-1, and he touched, you know, he hit 20 and bigger on the exchanges beforehand. That was the race in which Broomfield Burg should have won and finished second to Lively Citizen, and Royaume Uni was just in behind. Now, you would say he's slightly more exposed than Broomfield Burg, and Broomfield Burg ought to confirm the form, and I don't really have a massive problem with that. But in terms of handicapping, he's off the same mark now, and of course Broomfield Burg, having won at Kempton last time out, is 4 points higher. So there's not much between them in terms of the ratings. I thought he didn't get a terribly hard race that day. And I also thought Jimmy Moore rode him at Cheltenham as if he was slightly concerned about his stamina for the stiff test there up the hill. And he sort of nursed him home. But it was a very good run anyway. He was then a little disappointing at Kempton last time out. But heavy ground would not have been suitable for him. He's a son of Galileo, who has given the impression that good ground is very important to him. So his opportunities are limited outside of the spring. And I just think that Gary Moore has been thinking about this race for a year. And if you look at Gary Moore's record in this race, then you'll know that when Gary Moore starts thinking Betfair Hurdle for one of his horses, you have to sit up and take notice. And what I love about Gary's approach to this race is that he doesn't think, right, I've got to get this horse up to 140 in the handicap to guarantee he gets in. He will sneak them in at the bottom of the weights all the time. And again, this is about applying yourself months in advance. So Wyoming had a mark of 116 at the start of the season. He needed to get that win on the board. So he got the easiest option out of the way first, got him up to a mark that would probably get him in. He would have been out of the weights had the top weights stayed in here, but he ends up sneaking in off 10 stone 2. Yes, you can say that his form has plateaued, and that he's just got sort of place claims against potentially progressive horses. I still think there's more to come from him. You know, having watched his career of hurdlers to date, I think there's a bigger performance. I think Newbury over 2 miles, the way they run here at the track, will suit him. He doesn't want to get too far off the pace, though. If you watch lots of replays of the Schweppes, this will go trophy, the Betfair, as it's been through the years, you don't get many horses winning this coming from way off the pace. You've got to be reasonably handy. Now he just wants to be buried away just behind the leaders. I think that's the way he will be ridden here. And he was 33s during the week, and I backed him at 40s anti-post. So what is he now, about 16s, 20s?
22s, I can see.
22s is still fair enough, I think. And I think, you know, he doesn't look enormously sexy because I think a lot of people will look at him and think that he hasn't been laid out for this, whereas, you know, the Broomfield Burgs of this world and the JPR ones look like they have been. With Daryl, I struggled to find the form clue to JPR1. Clearly, he meets the trends as an improving novice who's had 3 runs to get into this, but he's been very competitive in all 3 of those runs. And while he should improve, you'd expect a novice to improve even after 3 runs. I don't see anything that gives him a really strong claim here. I think you basically need to have him improving 10 pounds, just to be competitive.
He's been talked about like he's got £10 in hand.
I don't see that. No, I can see him being competitive. I can even see him winning, but I can't see a really strong case for that. And yet I've heard people talking about him as if he's some kind of, moral certainty based on his form. And that I don't really get that. I don't really see Colin Tizard as a kind of trainer to try to take advantage of that as a rule either. He's had a couple of horses for this in the past, or a couple of horses who would have looked really good in this race in the past that he hasn't bothered putting in, who've got lenient handicap marks based on form that had worked out really well, and he wasn't concerned with putting them in. And I think 1 or 2 people have had a word in his ear and said, you need to find one to put in the Betfair Hurdle, and he's done it this year. But I've heard him being very dismissive in the past about his novices, saying, or people say I should run on the Betfair Hurdle, but I'm not interested in that. And now he's bent to that idea, but I don't think he's the happiest in the world to do it, really. So I'm not sure the JPR1 is the great plot that 1 or 2 people think he is. The other Moore horse, 50 Ball, could run well. My concern with him is that he lost his way over fences. His first run over fences was over the wrong trip. And I thought he ran an absolute cracker to be third at Sandown, but his jumping was awful at Newbury and at Ascot, and his attitude wasn't great either. He looked like he wasn't in love with it. Now, he wouldn't be the first to revert to hurdles and bounce back to his old form. And of course, he ran a cracker in the race last year. So if he's back to that kind of form, then he's a player as well. But I was quite taken by the fact that Jamie was on my selection and Josh was on 50 ball. And I will take that as a positive until someone disabuses me of that notion.
Until the race itself. No, but as you say, that is fascinating, the fact that Jamie Moore rides, I can never say his name ever, this horse, Royaume Uni, as well, then in this race at around 22-1 over taking the ride on 50 ball. But both of the lads then in agreement about JPR1 is not this plot job, at least on paper, that people are dubbing him as anyway in the Betfair Hurdle. But difficult to assess this year's Betfair Hurdle, I thought. So that's all of our scheduled coverage then from Newbury. So Rory, I'm going to throw it back to you, please, for anything else from Newbury.
Nothing else from me at Newbury. I haven't had a chance to take in all the other races.
Not at all. Daryl, yourself from Newbury.
Oh, hang on. No, no.
That was some build up as well for that.
Yeah, that's all right.
No problem at all then from the lads. So we will switch over to our second meeting of the day. This now comes from Warwick, where we have 3 scheduled races to cover, but we begin with the listed Warwick Mares Hurdle for 4-year-olds and over 2 mile 5. Winner of this race 2 years ago, Indefatigable, heads the betting as the 8-11 favourite, where she has 3 rivals to contend with here. So Daryl, how do you play this race?
Oh, you don't. I don't. I have absolutely no interest in this at all. I wouldn't back Indefatigable if you gave me free money to do it. I just wouldn't. Breizh Rock, who knows what you're going to get with her. White Hot Chili filly, I don't think she's an out-and-out 2.5 miler. I never have. Get a Tonic's probably the most interested at 10-1, given they had Molly's Ollie's Wishes ended up in this race earlier in the week, and they decided to go with this one. So, outsider of the field.
Yep, outsider of 4 then, very briefly summarised there by Daryl. I can tell is not inspired by this race, so don't blame him, but taking a chance if he had to then with Get A Tonic at 10-1 as the outsider of the field. Rory, any stronger opinions?
Well, I'm a big fan of Indefatigable. I really like her as a race mare, but I'm not in a rush to back her in a race like this. You know, I want to see her run well and go to Cheltenham for another run in the Mares Hurdle. You know, she does really well at the festival. She's suited by a biggish field, and aside from not wanting to start at Newbury in her penultimate start, she's been very good. I thought her second to Martello Sky, giving her £5 at Cheltenham last time out, was a tremendous run and gives her the clear winning of this race. But as Daryl says, four runner Mares Hurdles don't often make particularly enticing betting heats.
They make poor men.
Yes.
And women, so I include myself in that.
And just in defense of Marie's Rock as well, I've never been a fan of Marie's Rock at all. Not. I think she was. I mean, she was talked off as a champion hurdle horse a couple of seasons ago, and I thought everyone was getting massively ahead of themselves, given that she's winning listed races at Taunton. She has got her act together this season, and although she pulled up at Kempton last time out, that really wasn't her fault. She was brought to a standstill that day, and you can forgive that. She looked much more straightforward and very much confirmed previous promise from winning at Kempton before that. So it's kind of a comeback. Marie's Rock, always forgiven. I think she's finally doing what she should have been doing a couple of seasons ago, and it's not really her fault that she didn't fulfill the ambitions that one or two people had for her because they were unrealistic at the time. She went through a period of being very, very free in her races and being almost impossible to steer, but she seems a fair bit better now, although she's still always going to be quite a free goer. So I'm not putting her up here, and I think again a small field probably isn't ideal for her because she sees daylight throughout it. But I don't want to be knocking her. I want to say, fair play to you. You managed to win a decent race at Kempton, and I hope you keep going forward. But not for me today.
That was a very nice verdict, though, Rory. Nonetheless, that was very fair and very nice for you to say that about Marie's Rock anyway. And I'd say she was one of the 2 joint favourites then last time out in Lanzarote, who basically got wiped out their entire race and curtailed by a faller in that race. So she could be forgiven, but it's just such a tricky race to have any sort of strong betting opinion in. So we'll happily leave that race there. We'll move on to the 205 then at Warwick. This is the Grade 2 Kingmaker Novices Chase of 5-year-olds and over 2 miles. We have a real battle on our hands in this race. We have 2 of the leading British fancies for the Alko going head to head. Great for the sport, maybe not so great for us because, of course, we're hoping that one of them, well, is going to beat the other one then. And so that means that one of our leading hopes is going to be beaten for prior to the Cheltenham Festival. So Lord knows that we need the help at the Cheltenham Festival as much as we can get them this year. But it's not just a 2-runner contest, as we know. So Rory, 4 runners in here. Please help us out with this race.
Yeah, this is basically the English Arkle, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Well, like, listen, that's being very rude because at the time of us speaking, I think Edwardstone is actually favourite for the Arkle, ahead of Blue Lord. Looking at the markets for that, because the Irish Arkle was not particularly, it was a strong race, but it was a slightly slow motion finish because he went very hard in it, and it hasn't convinced everyone. So Edwardstone has found himself sneaking into favourite's position with Fernie Hollow being out. So no one wanted him after he'd won a Grade 1 at Sandown or followed up by 10 lengths in a Grade 2 at Kempton. But all of a sudden, he's without doing anything else, he's nudging favouritism for Cheltenham. I'd be against him next month on the basis that, you know, all the trends there for Arkle winners tend to speak against him to a degree. He spent a little bit too long over hurdles before he went chasing in the first place, and he's a horse who is probably wants a little bit of room to jump, and given softish ground at Sandown and Kempton, he's a bold jumper and he looked very good on those occasions. In Arkle, you're jumping quickly in close company, and that probably counts against him. Here he is in a 4-runner race, which should suit him, and he is the best horse in the race. And in a manner of speaking, it would be disappointing if he doesn't go and win this, unless you end up with a grandstand finish, in which case suddenly you've got 3 potential Arkle winners. But if he's beaten here, you're fairly worried that it's another race that that British hopes are taking a knock in. But yeah, on the form that he's shown, he should win this. But third time lucky remains quite an exciting sort. I think he's going to go the same way over fences as he did over hurdles, even though he's a very good jumper of a fence. He's going to hit a higher standard than he did over hurdles. But after showing very good form early last season, the longer the season went on, the more third time lucky looked a little bit short of top class. And when push comes to shove, I think he's going to be found wanting. He's had races that have suited him most of the season. When he was in a race that didn't suit him at Sandown, we saw that he had his frailties. He was impressive at Doncaster last time out, although he was left clear by the fall of For Pleasure at the last. There wasn't much between them at the time, but third time lucky was galloping all over him and would have won. So he should confirm that form. But I think he's got a little bit to find. You know, it's interesting that he'd almost dropped out of the Arkle betting after being beaten at Sandown, and then without having to show improved form at Doncaster against lesser horses, he suddenly climbed back up the betting ladder for that. But I think he falls just short. For all, he's an exciting horse to watch. So I think he will be beaten here. And Brave Shaska is the big unknown. Very impressive in a handicap here last time out, off a mark of 137. He would, again, we discussed him earlier on, he'd be the ideal type for the Grand Annual. You know, he's already a good jumper. His run style would be a big positive in the Grand Annual, whereas actually it's not particularly positive in the Arkle, historically speaking. But he's going to be the one to shoot at here, I think. For Pleasure can go forward as well. And obviously, if For Pleasure and Brave Shaska both want to go forward, then that could make things very interesting indeed. The other two will stalk them and look to pounce it. How good Brave Shaska is open to debate, because he just keeps doing enough, and he's progressed really well through the handicap ranks. So on ratings, he doesn't have much to find. I suspect that he's just in graded company. He might still just be a little bit behind, but the tactics is going to play a big part here. If he gets his own way in front, then Gavin Sheehan's tactics could end up being crucial. If he's able to slow things down and kick before the home turn, then he might be difficult to reel back in again. But if he's bothered by For Pleasure up front, then that should be setting things up for Edwardstone and third time lucky to some degree. But I think in a match between Edwardstone and third time lucky, Edwardstone should just have that touch of class.
Yeah, so class then to come to the fore for Edwardstone back over this course and distance again. But it is going to be fascinating, isn't it, Daryl, from a pace perspective in this race, exactly how it's going to play out. But who did you come down on the side of?
Lucky's going to win.
Yeah, I do.
I think it's going to come down to the two, Edwardstone and Third Time Lucky. I think Breizh is obviously an interesting addition to the race. For Pleasure should make the running, but I just think that they've been teaching Third Time Lucky. I think you can completely put a line through that run at Sandown. He was far too free. He was bolting down to his fences. I actually think he did remarkably well to only be beaten 16 lengths and finish third behind Edwardstone, given how much he emptied, how much of the tank he used early on, and how many fences he hit and how much ground he lost. I thought it was quite a remarkable performance from him. I think he's a much improved model over fences. He gains so much ground over his fences. Now, there's not a lot between Third Time Lucky and Edwardstone on their meeting at Cheltenham in the County Hurdle. But I thought Edwardstone needed every yard of that 2 mile, 1 furlong trip that day. And I thought Third Time Lucky, although in receipt of £5, made his move. Harry Skelton made the move far too soon in that race, and he got lonely out in front. I think he's a horse that travels really well. I wouldn't call him a travelly thing, but he is very something like that. He travels really strongly in behind horses. I don't think he wants to be out in front for too long. And I think Doncaster was really encouraging, given the 3-runner field and how he settled in behind. And he just looked much more professional. I think he's got the potential to win an Arkle. I do. I like Edwardstone a lot, and Edwardstone has won here. He looked like a winner here back in November, and then he won here later on that month. He's a very, very good horse. But I think with the shade of odds on for Edwardstone and the almost 2-1 you can get about Third Time Lucky, I think it's far too much for discrepancy. I like Third Time Lucky a lot. I think he's got more improvement to come than perhaps Edwardstone has. The time figure at Doncaster last time was really good. His rating of 153, I think, underestimates his abilities. 2 from 2 at Cheltenham. If you want to back him for this, I'd suggest backing him at 6-1 for the Arkle. Same goes for Breizh, really. Breizh 9-2 in here. If he causes a bit of an upset, he's around a 14, 16-1 shot for the Arkle. He obviously won't be that come the day. So whatever you're backing here, I suggest backing for the race in March. But I'm hoping that with Third Time Lucky being dropped in, the strong pace on offer from Full Pleasure, I'm hoping that will help him sell a little bit better. And I think he's a better jumper of a fence than Edwardstone. So, yeah.
Fascinating then for the differing opinions between the lads on this race. Rory with Edwardstone, Daryl going with Third Time Lucky, but it is going to be fascinating in between it with this contest in its own right. But of course, they're looking ahead to the Arkle itself, and hopefully we'll get a good winner or a good run from a few of these that can at least put the British into contention then in the Arkle itself. Now, our next race is our final scheduled race that we're going to be covering today. This is a 3:15 at Warwick. It's a 0-120 handicap hurdle for 4-year-olds and over 2 miles. Nice open handicap to sign off on. So, Daryl, who wins the race for you?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't done too much on this race. My initial reaction was to take a look at Lieutenant Rocco and find out why on earth he's 33-1 off a mark of 140, given how well fancied he was for the Grand Annual off a similar mark last year.
It would have been the ultimate rather than the Grand Annual.
Yeah, sorry, Grand Annual. God, any price you like for that. So I thought he was interesting, but I've got to do a lot more work on this race. In all honesty, Kate, I was getting all hot and sweaty under the collar about the big breakaway. So.
Yes, to be fair, and I just realised I've talked about the complete wrong race then when I was previewing this. This is the 3:15. I accidentally talked about the race then prior to it, so apologies. I'm all over the place in at Oaksey House today, but at least you didn't have a strong opinion then to get me out of it. So Rory, quickly take over from me and spoke about the wrong race. 3:15 at Warwick, please.
Yeah, listen, Daryl's right. The most interesting horse in this race is Lieutenant Rocco, who had a setback this time last year and missed Cheltenham, and he was well talked up when he was with Nick Mitchell. He's now on a second trainer since. He's owned by a guy called Sid Hosey, who's set up a who employed Nick Mitchell as a private trainer. He then had Jack Smith, Ralph, if you like, as his trainer for a while. And now Harriet Brown is training the horses. And she's just beginning to get on top of them now. She's had a couple of winners. It hasn't been particularly easy. It's been a tough transition. Lieutenant Rocco turned up for the Fleur de Lis chase at Lingfield last time out, looking enormous. He looked very unfit, but he showed the speed to lead that field for most of the race before naturally getting very tired and he stopped quickly in the straight. Now he will definitely need another run. Now the drop back to 2 mile 4 is a negative for him, but I think the reason he's dropping back to 2.5 miles is because Harriet knows that she needs to get him fit, and they've clearly tried to get him fit on the gallops at home, and that will only take them so far. So he will need another race to blow away the cobwebs, and then they'll look to get him in again, possibly for the Ultima again, or indeed the Kim Muir if they wanted to go in that direction. So I think he's very interesting going forward, but I think he'll still need the run. So it's not for him today. I see no reason, aside from slightly sloppy jumping, I suppose. But I see no reason not to go with Jacamar again. I was very sweet on him when he won at Kempton over Christmas. He ran a cracking race at Wincanton on his previous start and didn't get the credit he deserved for that. And I thought he ran really well in a Grade 3 handicap at Cheltenham last time out, where he raced wider than most. He ended up losing quite a lot of ground around the bends. I thought he jumped pretty well. A lot of people would have been concerned about his jumping there because he wasn't particularly fluent at Kempton, but he finished very strongly to win that competitive novices handicap. He's only £2 higher than for winning that valuable televised handicap. So he's in here off a mark of 132. Harry Reid takes over from Paddy Brennan, who rode last time. Of course, Danny Mullins was on board when he won at Kempton. He's benefited from the fitting of cheek pieces, which has just helped him sharpen up a little bit in his last 2 runs. But he's definitely still in a winning mark. 2.5 miles around Warwick will suit him. The series of fences in the back straight will test him a little bit because, as I said, his jumping's a little bit scratchy. But he doesn't back off his fences. He has a go at them, and if he makes a mistake, he just shrugs it off and gets on with the job. So although you'd rather he was an absolutely impeccable jumper, he's already got a decent record on his last 3 starts while making the occasional mistake. And with practice, he should get better. And what's not to like about Milton Harris?
Yeah.
Nothing is the answer to that.
Exactly, absolutely nothing not to like about Milton Harris's form then this season. And Jacamar, who again I also have a soft spot for because I also tipped him up then for that Kempton win on his penultimate starts. And as you say, he never instills you with confidence throughout his races, but if he's still winning and running well regardless, then there is that scope for further improvement then for Rory siding with Jacamar. But do watch out for Lieutenant Rocco if today isn't the day for him going forwards. And of course that is the 3:15 at Warwick. My apologies. The 2 mile 5 handicap chase, then not missing the race that I was talking about then for the previous contest at 2:40. So that is all of our scheduled races then that we've had to cover. So Rory, I'll throw it back to you, please, for anything else from Warwick.
No, sadly, although I have a quick look at the rest of the Warwick card, it's a pretty disappointing affair with very small fields through the day. So nothing else from me, I'm afraid.
No, it really is. That's very true. Daryl, anything else from Warwick for yourself?
Well, I was going to in Rem in the 350 at Warwick. I was going to say 350 in Rem for Miss Jane Williams. This horse is on a 5-timer. I thought he did remarkably well in ground that probably wouldn't have suited him when it was deep here back in December. To get up to win, to be in trouble. He's up £5. I think he's a better horse than that. I think he's easily should be rated in the 120s. He's up against a Skelton hot pot at the top of the market, but I just think his performance last time was just underestimated slightly. He was checked coming around the bend. The pace quickened when he was at the rear of the field. He was forced 5 or 6 wide, or 5 wide, and then he had to stay on really dourly after losing a good bit of ground there. I thought he was well worth an upgrade on that performance, so perhaps have a look at him in the 350.
Yes, that's in Rem in the 350, horse number 4, and it's some effort really to win 4 races in a row and still to only be rated 115.
Yeah.
That is quite something in itself. And Daryl, anything else from anywhere else for you on Saturday?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Rory, anything else from anywhere else?
Not particularly strong. There's a horse I quite like called Breizh Alko, who runs at Uttoxeter. He made his debut over fence. I think he's the first horse ever to do this because owner David Parry sent me a message asking about it. The only horse I can think of who's made his debut over fence is in a veteran's chase. He's had lots and lots of trouble over the years, and he's been very, very lightly raced. So he's only had about 8 starts all told. He started off with Ferdy Murphy. He spent time with Rebecca Menzies, but she suggested that he go to Martin Keithley because he would benefit from different gallops He, as I said, he's got dodgy legs, but he has taken a couple of races recently. On that chase debut at Lingfield, he destroyed the first fence. So the first fence he jumped in public, he broke basically, and I thought he did remarkably well that day to get back into contention. He's beaten 12 lengths into fifth, but he lost a huge amount of momentum and a lot of ground at that first. And then he ran very, very well back over hurdles at Chepstow last time out to be second off a mark of 100. The fact that they're going back over fences suggests that Martin Keithley is convinced that his jumping will stand up second time. It's not much of a race he's in, and the ground will suit him as well. So as long as he gets over the first couple of fences without mishap, I think he'll take plenty of beating there.
Yes, that's Breizh Alko, then horse number 2 in the 3:43 at Uttoxeter. Now, lads, all there is left to do then is to get your naps of the weekend. So, Rory, your nap, please.
Given I've been banging the drum for a while, I think I've got to stick with do I with Wyoming? No, you know what? And I'll give it a little correction there as well. I'm going to go with Skandiburg. That 33-1 is not available. It was drying up at the time anyway. I think 22-1 is the best price you can get about him, but I still think he's a fair bet at that price in a race that will suit him.
So Skandiburg then, but Rory's basically given you two at the same time there without even meaning to there with Royaume Uni. The horse who I cannot say, stop tipping him up, Rory, because I can't say his name. Him anyway, as well as the second best bet then for Rory. Daryl, your nap, please.
I'll go in the same race. I'll go for the big Breakaway, but I have obviously backed and tipped as well, Skandiburg. So it would be no bad thing should Rory's nap beat mine.
That's it. That's a team player right there then. So Daryl also favouring Skandiburg, but also the main nap is going to be the big Breakaway in that same race. So that's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. So thank you to the lads for all of their hard work yet again on a pretty tricky weekend of racing. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to our sponsors, SBK, and we will catch up with you again next week.